Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I want to take a little bit more of a positive spin on some of the free agency stuff that's been happening over the last couple of days, because it seemed like I've just been talking about, oh, these moves are too risky, or this team is a loser, or why did this team make that move? There's also been some really smart signings over the last couple of days and some overlooked ones that I want to point out in this video. And we're going to start with Kevon Looney going back to the Golden State Warriors on a 3-year, $15 million deal. And I could not believe that this is what he signed for when I saw it come across my Twitter. And this had to have been a huge, huge discount compared to what some other teams across the league would have been willing to pay him. And obviously, it makes sense why he would want to stay there. The Warriors are still going to be very good. He's going to have a big role with them. But realistically, it seemed like he could have signed for upwards of $10 million a year on a 3 to 4 year deal somewhere else, and he decided to come back for $5 million a year. Looney is incredibly valuable to this team. We saw that in the finals as a 5-man that can switch onto smaller guards and stay in front of them. Just a really good defensive player, an active offensive and defensive rebounder, can finish around the rim. And then on top of that, the Warriors also managed to bring in Willie Cauley-Stein on a minimum contract or an almost minimum contract. But I don't want to talk about that too much. It's just crazy how often this team is able to make moves like this and bring in guys that they shouldn't be able to on salaries that they do. But Kevon Looney has to be considered, in my opinion at this point, like the best value signing of the entire offseason in terms of how much value he provides the Warriors on the court compared to how much they're going to be paying him over the next couple of seasons. Next up now is Rodney Hood of the Portland Trailblazers, and this is a team that actually has made a couple of really, really good and interesting moves to position themselves as well as they can to try and be a true contender in the Western Conference this coming season. And Hood was always a player that I thought that the Blazers should really make an effort to try and bring back in free agency after trading for him from Cleveland, because he actually has a little bit more upside left. He's someone that could be a good scorer for them as a pretty good wing. Not so good defensively, but a good shooter, can create and can score. And that's something that they're going to need a little bit more of outside of just focusing and leaning so much on CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard to create everything for them. And they got him on really good value as well. Like, I'm pretty confident that someone would have paid Rodney Hood a little bit more than this and potentially on a longer term deal. But to get him at what they did over a 2-year span is going to be really helpful for them, not only in terms of their salaries and keeping their money down, but on the court as well. He should be incredibly valuable for them. And I'm interested to see how much more he improves over the lifetime of this contract so that maybe he can get paid even more 2 years from now when his contract is up. Next up now is the first of the minimum contract guys that are clearly just trying to chase a championship at this point in his career, and that is Wesley Matthews going to the Milwaukee Bucks. And this was a huge deal for them because the Bucks had an incredibly active and incredibly expensive offseason. Obviously, they lost Malcolm Brogdon to the Indiana Pacers, and they also brought back Chris Middleton. They paid Derrick Bledsoe during the season. They brought back Brook Lopez. They brought in Robin Lopez. So they spent a lot of money. So to be able to get a player as good as Matthews on this cheap of a deal is incredible value for them. Now, like I said, it's pretty clear that Matthews wanted, a pretty large role. He should be good for this team as a shooter, an occasional playmaker when Jonas isn't on the floor and when Middleton and Bledsoe aren't taking on that role. But he also really wants to win a championship and probably took a pretty steep discount to do so, because he was actually pretty important for the Indiana Pacers once he joined them after being bought out last season as a little bit of a playmaker and a shooter and a scorer. And even though at this point in his career, obviously post-Achilles injury from a couple of years ago, he's not going to be a great athlete. He's not going to be an outstanding defender, but he's going to be really valuable for them as a shooter and, like I said, an occasional playmaker. And getting him at this kind of value was a huge deal for the Bucks, considering all the other money that they ended up spending. Moving on now to another really surprising one for me, and that's Jonas Valanciunas of the Memphis Grizzlies. And this is surprising on two fronts. One, I'm not the biggest Valanciunas fan, so it's kind of weird that he's in one of these videos about a really smart move. But two, he turned down a player option for next season that was worth more than what he just signed for on an annual basis over the next 3 seasons. He had like a $17-18 million player option for next season and turned that down to sign a 3-year deal worth $15 million a season. Now that means one of two things. One, he overestimated how much teams would be willing to pay for him over a long-term deal, so he ended up having to take one that was actually less than his player option. Or two, he really just wanted the long-term security that a 3-year deal would provide, but that's normally something that you see more so out of older players. But in the end, the Grizzlies got great value out of this, and it's important that they did, because if they didn't bring back Valanciunas or by extension DeLon Wright, they really wouldn't have gotten anything out of the Marc Gasol trade that they made at the trade deadline. So they bring back Valanciunas as another relatively young guy that should be able to grow alongside Jaren Jackson and John Morant and the other guys they're going to be bringing in over the next couple of years. And for a player of his caliber, like, he had incredible statistics in his handful of games that he played in Memphis. He's probably not going to be able to keep that up, but he's still going to be an important piece for them, and maybe even a good trade piece down the line as well, on a relatively fair deal. So it's important for teams like Memphis that are rebuilding to get contracts and get players like this, and to get Valanciunas on less than the player option that he turned down on an annual basis is a big deal for them. Moving on now to another player that's just a really good value on kind of a medium range salary contract, and that's Derrick Rose going to the Detroit Pistons. Now, I'll admit, there was so many other free agency things for me to focus on that I kind of forgot that Derrick Rose was a free agent and that someone was going to be able to sign him after a really good season last year on a minimum deal with the Timberwolves. And honestly, I think he automatically becomes the best point guard on the Pistons roster. I'm not a huge fan of Reggie Jackson. I think Derrick Rose might end up being slid into like a six-man role there. I don't really know what kind of role they sold him on there, especially, with however they want to handle the Reggie Jackson situation. But he's going to be a really good scorer for them. If he can sustain his three-point shooting numbers from last season, that'll be a huge bonus as well. And just an extra little punch of playmaking for a Pistons team that certainly needs it. And just like everybody else on this list, it kind of seemed like he could have gotten more money than this, or at least maybe he was supposed to get more money than this going into the offseason. But for both sides, I think it works out well. Like I said, Detroit gets a nice, low risk, not too much money deal for a player that should really be able to help them, and Derrick Rose should be able to continue to bring up his value in this kind of situation on a team that definitely needs the kind of value on the court that he provides. So another really smart, high value deal, really, for both sides. And now we get to another minimum salary deal that came a little bit later on in the free agency process, and that's Wilson Chandler going to the Brooklyn Nets. Now, obviously, the Nets are going to be a team that's going to be looking to sign these kinds of players and build their team up a little bit on the margins, because they've already used up all their cap space to bring in Kyrie and KD and DeAndre Jordan, and moves like this, bringing in Wilson Chandler. And then even before that, I could have put the Garrett Temple signing on here as well. But in terms of contract value, I think Wilson Chandler is going to provide a little bit more value just because his deal is so cheap. He's not going to be an outstanding player, but he did have value last year for Philadelphia as a wing that should be able to guard relatively well. And as long as he can shoot well, then he should have success with this team. And this is kind of a player, or at least a player type, that the Nets have had success with over the last few seasons. Players like DeMar Carroll and Jared Dudley that might seem a little bit over the hill, but are still able to make jump shots and guard and defend pretty well for them. So another deal that makes sense for a team that's going to continue to look for players like this on the buyout market and on minimum deals to fill out the roster around their new big three, if you want to call it that, especially this season, and then moving into 2020 once Kevin Durant is actually able to play. So another good signing, this one for the Nets. Last up now is another player that signed on a minimum deal and has been doing this kind of 1 year from team to team to team thing for the last couple of seasons. And it's really strange to me that nobody's given Jeff Green a little bit more of a chance and a longer deal than just 1 year. But he ended up with the Utah Jazz once again on a minimum contract for 1 year. And he's going to be really helpful for them. The Jazz are another team like the Nets that maybe didn't bring in the same level of star power this offseason, but are going to be looking to build up their roster around the margins with some really cheap players, some minimum contract guys, maybe some younger second-round pick or undrafted guys or G League guys. And Jeff Green is another player that's going to be able to help this team as a perimeter player that should be able to guard threes and fours, hopefully be able to knock down some shots on the outside. And again, it's just proven to be a valuable player, a really good locker room guy, just a good presence to have around over the last couple of seasons. And it's surprising that nobody's really been able to capitalize on that, or at least that he hasn't been able to capitalize on that with a bit of a longer deal worth a little bit more money. But maybe, again, he's just chasing a championship. He's chasing a team that still has a pretty good role for him, and he's just looking to continue to be on good teams, and that's why he's willing to continually take a discount. Or maybe teams know something that I don't know, and that's the reason that he's not getting paid as much as really it seems like he should be over the last couple of seasons. But all that doesn't really matter because the Jazz got a good player on good value that should be able to help them and really bolster their rotation. And they've done an awesome job of doing that after I expressed some concerns post Mike Conley trade of how they were going to kind of fill out the roster. They've done an awesome job of that. And the Jeff Green signing is just another example. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video. And I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, I have had a ton of free agency stuff coming out this week, all throughout this past week. If you have missed any of those, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. There's a ton of stuff there to look at. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you all next time.